Welcome to the Faith to You podcast. We have a treat today. I'm here with Michael and Crystal Porter. They're the parents of Emmerit. We have been praying for Emmerit now at our church for over 10 months. And they're just going to share an update and a little bit about their journey with Emmerit. So sort of walk us through the start. Emmerit was born April 4th, 25 weeks, 15 weeks premature. 1 pound, 4 ounces. So just share with us a little bit about just everything that happened initially with Emmerit being born. What were some of the initial complications?
Well, he was born actually April 11th. So
April 11th. Got it.
You're trying to short him a week, and he needs all the weeks he can get because he was 25 weeks at birth, but his real date is kind of like 22 weeks. So because he was a little delayed, but mom had.
Yeah, it's called intrauterine growth restriction is what he experienced because of the preeclampsia that I had during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so she went to a different hospital to have some, get a checkup and all that kind of stuff.
I started showing signs of swelling and signs of the kind of classic preeclampsia condition at the week of 18. And so whenever they're like, okay, well, we need you to make it as far as we can, put me on, aspirin to try to thin the blood membrane to be able to allow him to grow through the placenta. It's just that we were in such conflict that it caused him to start growing more slowly. We went to go get steroid shots to help his lungs develop in time. And it was on that time period whenever they were like, well, you're not going to make it. So the idea was to get to 28 weeks exponentially. He would have done so much better if we could have made it to 28 weeks, but we didn't. We just got to 25. And it was when I went to go get that shot that it kind of really set things in motion. They were looking at his heart rate and they found that it was much lower and it was half of what it should be. And immediately they's like, you're not going home. Just, settle in for the night. Little did I know I was going to be taking an ambulance ride to some town I've never heard of in California. So.
And at that time, we still had one of our 2 foster children. And I had him, and I was at home that night. And so the next day, he had a visitation due with his father. So I took him to the park where we make the child exchange. And Crystal calls me and says, well, I'm at this other hospital now. And I'm like, okay, why?
Yeah, and I sent him the address and the room number I was in. I said, well, I'll keep you posted, but they're deciding when they're going to discharge me or not. And then they walk in a couple hours later and they're like, well, what type of C-section would you like to have? I'm like, I'm only 25 weeks. You're not taking this baby. We're not talking about it. And the lady comes in and she tells me, well, you can either, let him come out naturally or we can take him now and he has an opportunity to live. And I'm just kind of looking at her. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. And then that's when she told me that your womb has become a hostile environment for your child. Wow. Now is the time.
So at that point, she calls me and says, well, they're going to take the baby. And I'm like, where are you? And where's this place, And while I'm talking to her on the phone, I'm looking it up on Google Maps. And I'm like, well, it's a good hour and a half away if the traffic's not bad. And I still got to do something with this foster child. And so, I get on the phone and start making these calls to the social worker and saying, I'm going to have to leave him with his auntie and she can take it from there. You can pick him up from there because I got to go. My wife's in, a serious world of hurt and I need to be there.
Yeah.
And she goes, okay, well, that's fine. And so I, go home, start packing up because I got to take all my medications. I have no idea how long I will be there. Throw a few clothes in a bag and that kind of thing. And by the time I get there, I can't find her in the hospital. She's not where I thought she would be.
Yeah. Because I was having the preeclampsia is really hard on the female, the mother is carrying. And so my blood pressures were completely out of control. I was getting emergency meds to try to stabilize me. And as one of the doctors, I remember him saying, as much as I really care about you, I'm sorry, I just need to focus on him right now. He's in a world of hurt, And so when we went, by the time Michael, arrived, I had just told him, just check in with the front desk, find out where I am. I remember calling my mom and my dad and telling them, I don't know what's going to happen. I need y'all's attention. Because, life happens and people are talking in the background, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look, I'm serious. Like, I need your attention. I love you. Thank you for being the parent child I've always been. And, I'm fixing to go into surgery. I don't know what's going to happen. They're going to take Emmerit. We're just, just keep me in prayer. Michael's on his way. Keep him in prayer. And they were like, Crystal, is everything okay? I was like, I don't know. Just, it's the time is here. And we all could feel the heavy weight of, they don't know if they're going to find out if their daughter's alive or not, or if the baby's going to make it or not. And, they don't know. It was very different. It was a very heavy moment whenever you're in transit and you don't know if your loved one's going to be there when you finally find them in hospital or not. So.
Yeah, she was actually in a recovery room when I got here, and she was having difficulty breathing on her own.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there, and I of course said, "Can I see my child?" And they're like, "Well, he's not really ready for that." And I'm like, well, "What do you mean he's not ready?" I had no idea what they meant by that. It was kind of scary, and I didn't get to see him that night. I had to wait till the next day. Meantime, my patient over here, she's under the influence of whatever it is they give you to keep you from getting all kinds of problems, some kind of magnesium concoction. And so she's really out of it. She's sleeping a lot. She's resting a lot, which is good. I'm freezing to death in her hospital room, and I can't see my child. And nobody's got any answers for me. They just keep, this will be explained. This will be explained. Like, but I have questions, and nobody was answering my questions at that time. But, as you can see, he's gotten a lot further along since that time. He literally would have fit in the palm of my hand. I mean, 1 pound is like, in a couple of ounces is like a can of peas or a can of corn. That's what you're looking at. No bigger than that, no more weighty than that. And when I first saw him, I thought, what is this? I seen medical displays of, fetuses in jars and things, but I was like, this one's moving.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, the miracle of life.
You have these expectations that life throws at you, that babies look like this, and you see all these pictures and such, and it's nothing like that. Like, the world never talks about the ugly of unexpected births. And, it was really unbelievable when you look at him, because he looked like all crispy and crunchy, burnt on the outside when he was first born. And his pigmentation wasn't right. It was just awful. It was really horrible. Every day was hour by hour, sometimes minute by minute, and it was really difficult, because I remember when we were on day like 4, and it was just like, is he going to make it to day 7? And then they were like, well, at day 10, we do this one, milestone test. And if he does well, we'll continue on. And then at day 30, he has another one. I mean, at least this time clock is ticking, and it's so incredibly slow, because you never know if, like, what's going to happen. Is he going to make it, or is he not going to make it? Is he going to have this problem with his heart? Is he going to have a brain bleed? I can't remember all of the.
At some point they said, do you want to hold him? And I'm like, how do you hold this? I don't know how to. I haven't held a baby in 30 something years, and I sure haven't held one that's looks like Thumbelina or something. I mean, little tiny little. How do I hold it? One hand here and wave at people, or what? But that's kind of where a part of the faith journey started. There is because this was all in God's hands at that point.
Yeah.
I'm driving up to a hospital and praying that, I don't lose a child. I don't lose my wife. What happens if both of them are gone when I get there? Now what do I do? Okay. Driving and praying is probably not the thing you should be doing, but God was looking out for me.
Yeah. So it was very heavy leaning that way, that both of us could have been lost. So yeah, that was real. That was a real thing.
So Emmerit continues to fight. God continues to heal him. Fast forward a couple months with me to August. You guys were letting us know that things were not looking good. And I came out and saw you guys August 13th. We weren't sure if Emmerit was going to make it the next day. It was day to day at that point. So talk us through what was going on in August with Emmerit.
Well, he started having, I'm going to mispronounce it probably. He just started swelling up. The liquids in his body started going out into the tissues, and he was not able to drain them out. They would give him Lasix and he could go urinate, but it wasn't taking this fluid out of all his tissues and his legs and his arms. And he was just puffing up. You saw one of those pictures. He's laying on his back. His belly's all shiny. He looks like he swallowed a beach ball.
Yeah.
It's horrible looking. And he could not see. His eyes were closed because they were so swollen. His eyelids, he could not, couldn't see, couldn't move. And we're just waiting to die. All the signs were, well, his kidneys are failing. His lungs, I think they described it as looking like a shattered glass. They're supposed to look all kind of spongy, but these look like shattered glass. And that's when we contacted you, and some other folks said, this is it. And his, as I recall, his CO2 concentrations went really high. And they said, well, we have to put him on a different kind of ventilator that basically pulses. It's called an oscillator, and it just does this. It puts the air in and pulls it back out. Just as fast as it goes in, it comes back out. And so they had him on that to stabilize him somewhat. And, it did its job. It took the CO2 excess out of his system, but he still was all puffy and, his color wasn't good. His heart rate was erratic.
And he was having seizures.
And he was having seizures. And, because he had some problems with his potassium levels. If you have a problem with your potassium, your heart rate goes all kinds of crazy. He had to be CPR for like 4 minutes at one point. And so, it was just a matter of, okay, let's pull the plug. He's not going to make it.
I mean, that wasn't the first time. We had several events where you're at the point, how much more can he take? And literally throughout these months that we skipped, he had been bagged. I mean, like almost weekly. They would have to. He couldn't maintain his ventilation or his oxygen. He was on blood pressure medicine because he couldn't maintain his volume in his body. His heart had started to have failure, and so they was giving him calcium. He was on like 14 pumps. He was getting all kinds of meds, and it's just. I remember talking to one of the other believers, and they were like, at what point do you stop trying to keep him alive? Are we delaying his death, or are we giving him a chance? And we had to really take the time to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Is this our will, or is it God's will? Is it us, or is it what? Are we just being good stewards of what's given to us, and we're trying to, we're reading to him, we're singing to him since day one, we're loving on him and talking to him every day, telling him who his family is, and interacting with him on touch and all kind of things, just to try to stimulate him and let him know that he's loved. But at what point does your love start to suffocate someone beyond their ability to live? And, we started having these conversations, and some of the doctors' views were, yes, we've done all we can. We're giving him all the support we can. And when you ask them, then, you can't, they're not magicians. You can't ask them, well, what is his quality of life going to be? They don't know how much oxygen was denied to the brain. They don't know if he's going to have significant developmental delays later on at, 2, 5, or 8. So it was really difficult, and we're looking at him, and then at some point he starts changing colors, and his skin tone looks like he's literally decaying in the bed, and we're watching him. He's no longer responding. Sometimes even when his eyes was closed, he would turn his head and let us know that he knew which way that the sound was coming from, or he would squeeze your hand because he knew that you were there. He was doing nothing at this point.
Yeah.
And he had him on this oscillator, and because of the tubing in it, we couldn't hold him. And Crystal remarked that she would rather hold a warm baby rather than a cold one. So we made the decision, and this is after we prayed with you and another pastor or two and a church full of people somewhere, Mexico, I think. Show us, what do we do? And so we made a decision. Well, we want to hold him, get that physical touch going. And so they said, well, we'll take him off this ventilator, but he may or may not make it during the transition to a different ventilator that we think he might be able to tolerate. We said, well, let's do it.
At least long enough for you to hold him. And then as he passes, then you can make the decision to allow him to pass that way.
Yeah. And so they come in, they get the 2 ventilators ready to go, and they're doing the transition. I'm watching. He has a monitor that talks about his oxygen saturation, and it's pretty critical. You don't want to go too low. And I'm watching it the whole time. It took, I don't know, a minute and a half for them to switch it over. And that would have been the time that if he was going to expire, he would have expired then. But I noticed it never went below 95%, which was very good. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd because, he's breathing room air if he's breathing at all.
Yeah.
And so then they get him hooked up to the other machine, and it goes to 95, 96, stays there. If they put him in my arms, I hold him a while. I think the grandfather holds him for a while, Crystal's dad, and Crystal's mom holds him, and he seems to be doing okay. And, we're doing a lot of praying over him and whatnot. I don't remember when you ended up holding him. The next day. Yeah. And as you can see, God has worked his healing touch.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think a few days later, we had to make a decision to put him on dialysis, which involved an operation. And we were against the operation from day one, but finally they said, well, if he doesn't get it, he's not going to make it. Well, let's give him a shot. And so we did that. And, the nephrologist had told us that, his kidneys are shot. They're never really going to work. He's probably going to be dialysis the rest of his life. And we're like, well, we'll see. We'll see about that.
And I can testify. I was there with you guys. He was completely unresponsive when I visited. And what amazed me about that visit was just I could see your guys' faith. I could see that you weren't depending on yourself. You were in abject dependence upon the Lord. He was who was sustaining you. And we had such sweet fellowship. I was there for hours with you and with your parents, Crystal, and you guys blessed me. I came down to minister to you, and I left just filled up with the Spirit after just being with you guys. That time in the chapel, just praying, the 5 of us together, was just such a blessing to me. And it's been a blessing to me just even see your guys' faith journey, just see you growing as a couple. I gotta sort of sit in while you guys are doing premarital counseling when I was a brand new pastor just in 2020. And then, August of 2021, I'm sitting down with you guys in a hospital. And it's just amazing to see how God has just knit you together as husband and wife, to see you encouraging each other, building each other up. So God does a miracle. He saves Emmerit's life. And Emmerit continues to improve. But give us the update right now. How's Emmerit doing? How can we be praying for Emmerit?
Like Michael said, he's not out the woods. Like he literally coded this week.
Yeah, he did. He had
we were having CPR,
cardiac issue.
Epinephrine, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All the chest compressions and possible dislocation ribs. It's never we're not out the woods, and it's so hard to tell all the good moments, and that may be what you see, but there's a lot of downtime, and so today he's breathing. Okay, like his ventilator settings are, I think we're right, but we're dinging in the background as we speak. So
I don't
he
know
looks happy.
I don't know if you follow the Facebook or not, but
yeah, I do.
I tend to be more on the positive side. And just I kind of gloss over the name. Oh yeah, he had a little emphasis today, and pass that off. Because back in my younger days, I was more of a depressive realist. I don't expect things to go well every time, but I hope they do. But I know they don't always. But and I just try to do the make sure that I put out that positive vibe, because I want people to have a positive vibe. They can see God's work. God is healing. When I say, well, he's having trouble breathing, people go, "Oh, we'll be praying for him." Next thing you know, he's doing much better on that end. But he still has a ways to go. They're talking that we may be taking him home on a ventilator. As a matter of fact, we got rid of we had a lovely little sports car a little Mustang that was a lot of fun to drive, but was not very practical. And we looked around for a vehicle that had a 120 outlet in it so we could plug in a ventilator to take him home. We have to come over the Cahoon Pass, and that's 4,000 something feet. Well, if you're a guy with lung problems, you don't need to be at altitude very long without oxygen and such. So we purchased a vehicle that's got that as part of the vehicle. So I'm like, well, I didn't know you could do that in the car, but surprise. And so that's worked out well so far. And really just, his continued growth. He's a little deficient in some areas. He's not gaining length so much. I mean, he is, but it's very, very slow.
With numbers wise, he's less than 3% of his adjusted weight. So he's way, way under his.
Yeah, he's a very small child.
Way under.
He has plenty of room for his brain to grow inside of his cranium. They did an MRI not too long ago, just not because they had any reason to do so. They just were kind of checking on him. And they said, well, his brain could be a bit bigger. And the way it gets bigger is lots of stimulation. Well, when you're restricted to laying in bed, you can't move because you got, a tube that feeds you in the belly. You got a tube that takes the urine out of your body. And you got wires and things all over you. But fortunately, through prayer, we've gotten rid of the PD catheter. And I think the next big thing that should be coming out of him is because he was on a ventilator so long and it was in his mouth, he has somewhat of an aversion to having things in his mouth. And so he can't feed like a normal baby would. 9 months, a baby ought to be able to take a bottle. That's not happening with him. And if we can get that taken care of, and he starts growing, he may not need that ventilator support because his lungs will get bigger and his body will get bigger. So to me, the main thing now is him to get to the point of where he can take on food, whether, formula through a bottle, or we're doing him little tastes with him. I may have posted one of those where he's kind of going, nom, 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 nom. I put a little bit of food on his tongue and he may go, nah, nah. But, I may post one of those because I've got some fairly good ones here recently. And giving him an idea of that. And there's one day I stuck my finger kind of up there and he kind of sucked on my finger like he might have if it was a bottle. So, that's kind of the thing we're looking at is, maybe getting him off this ventilator, getting him off this feeding tube business. So he can be a baby. So he can, I just heard, I think it was Curtis was talking about they crawl, that helps them with reading. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was like, I read a lot of goofy things. I must have crawled. Well, my mother said I didn't start walking until I was 2. So I must have crawled a lot. So I read very well.
Yeah.
But, those are kind of where we're at. And that just, we feel the love that everybody's got.
Oh my gosh, we wouldn't make it without the love. The cards, the letters, the text messages, the Facebook's responses, it's incredible. And certainly we're standing and holding it together first and foremost by God's grace, but also with the community of believers in general, not just this church or that church. I'm talking individual prayers, some people are, they're spiritual warriors, and some people are learning how to pick up rocks. They've never really prayed the way they're praying now, but they traded in their rocks for a big baton because they're ready to go. Some people that was using hammocks are now got arrows. They're praying from afar, and people are throwing javelins. I mean, if you could compare our war of what's going on, it's literally an army, and it's an army with all kinds of weapons. Some people are holding up the shields of faith, and some people are walking in peace and ministering to us, and some people are actively fighting in the spiritual warfare where it's, I really feel like it's a huge spiritual warfare because how better to derail people than to attack some of their family and their faith and squash their beliefs before it even becomes reality. Too often that happen in scripture. You kill the babies before they grow up so they can become a threat. So
they're trying to get Emmerit ready for surgery to remove the catheter. Has that happened yet?
Yes, that happened. And it's, every time he goes to surgery, he comes back and he acts up for a while. And that's where we're kind of at right now. It's kind of like, they put him on 3 different ventilators, one to take him down there, one down in the suite, and then come back here and put him on his ventilator. And even though they're the same settings, they're different. It's like,
Yeah.
you drive your wife's car and it may be just like yours, but the brakes are just a little bit different.
Yeah.
The steering's a little bit different. And same thing on the ventilators. They're a little different, and he doesn't like change.
Mm-hmm.
You don't change things on this kid quickly. And then he kind of acts up, and his body's got to get used to it. I mean, he's been poked and prodded and, cajoled, and all kinds of things have happened to him. But that PE catheter is now out. So he's strictly urinating on his own with those kidneys.
Praise God.
Never going to work.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Because God did it. When the nephrologist asked me, he said, well, I don't know how that happened. I said, well, I do.
So main thing is to pray for that sort of swallow reflex, that he can get to the point where he can be eating on his own, so he can develop, those lungs can get strong. You guys are also telling me you're sort of going a million different directions right now. So how can we be praying for you guys as you're trying to take care of him? You have a life here in Palmdale. You're over there. You're back and forth. I know Crystal has her work, and
she's got her work, and we each we have our physical infirmities. I went to an orthopedic surgeon because my knee suddenly decided out of the blue to start hurting, and so they did an MRI. And, you've got a torn meniscus. We need to fix that. Well, okay, can we do something in between times? Yeah, we'll give you a shot of cortisone. Okay, fine. That's helped considerably, but they're still talking they need to do surgery. And I said, well, when? And they said, well, it'll be 3 or 4 months. I think, well, 3 or 4 months, this kid's coming home somewhere down the line. I don't know when. Even though Emmerit appears to be rather frail, he's very strong. There's no definition for Emmerit, so we just called him the relentless warrior. We made it up. It sounded good because he was fighting from day one, and he's been fighting. And even in the womb, he was fighting. His fists are going out like this. And he's been. And if you see a lot of his pictures, he's like this. Like, I'm ready to fight somebody. And he's always constantly pulling on his tubes, and they're like, he is strong. You try to pin him down, next thing you know, he's wiggled around and he's got his fists loose and he's grabbing for something. But he's still got a ways to go, but he's very strong. And so, God has blessed him with a lot of things that, a lot of children can't live at the kind of CO2 levels that Emmerit has lived at. He sits somewhere around 70, 80, whatever, some number they give out. And they go, well, normal is 40 to 50, but our child is at 70 to 80, and it doesn't have an effect on him. Why that? Well, because God has made him that way, fearfully and wonderfully made.
Praise God. So let me ask you one last question. People who want to get the updates, you have a Facebook page. What's the best way for them to get on that?
If they know somebody at the church that's on Facebook with them, anybody that's on that page can invite somebody in that's their friend. All right. Like if you're on there and you've got another friend, and they don't even have to be a member of the church, just somebody you're basically, when you invite them, you're vouching that they're not going to get on there and flame everybody and throw out, because I will kick people off if they start talking nasty. This is I try to keep it as Christian as I can. Occasionally I get aggravated with what's going on out here sometimes, because I'm only human, and I'm an action guy. I want to fix things. I want to make things better. And I'm in an area where I can't fix anything.
So any of our listeners who are friends with me on Facebook, you can ask me. I can invite you to their page. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or if you're friends with Michael, just ask him and he can add you to the page.
I mean, it's very simple. They just, they can request it, or you can just invite them. I mean, if you open that page up where Emmerit updates, somewhere it says members and it says invite, just click on that and it'll open up to your friend list, and you can invite people that are on your friend list.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I've invited several people.
And that's as simple as it is. Just if they know somebody, they can get in. It's a big club. We'll let anybody in.
Yeah. Well, we have had Emmerit in our bulletin every single week from April. We've been praying for him. We've been praying for you guys. We pray often in our congregation. The staff and I went for a prayer retreat this morning, and we were praying for Emmerit. So you guys are covered. I know you feel it, but I just want to let you know we're continuing to pray for you. I'm doing this just because people have been praying, and I want them to know how he's doing, what's going on. And I want them to know you guys, because you're such a blessing to me. And so thank you guys for giving me time time today to just hear from you, hear your story. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with our people. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Faith to You podcast listeners, for listening today. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.